My car died right in front of a building. I sat on the sidewalk waiting for the tow truck when I saw my wife coming out embracing a familiar man. It was our son's girlfriend's father. I took a selfie with them in the background and posted in the family group. Look who I found organizing the surprise engagement party. You know what's funny about Rock Bottom? It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or a dramatic soundtrack. No, it shows up on a Tuesday afternoon when your 2012 Subaru Outback decides it's had enough of your mediocre life choices and dies right there on Main Street, directly in front of Haven Plaza, the fanciest skyscraper in our boring Midwestern city. I'm talking full-on mechanical surrender, smoke billowing from under the hood like my car was auditioning for a disaster movie. That sad clicking sound that means your engine just gave its 2 weeks notice, and the kind of silence that follows where even the radio seems embarrassed for you. There I was, Martin Graves, 45 years old, marketing director at a company that sells industrial cleaning supplies to hospitals, which is exactly as thrilling as it sounds, sitting on the curb like some kind of suburban casualty. I called the tow truck 20 minutes ago, and the guy on the phone had the audacity to say he'd be there in 30 to 45 minutes, which in tow truck language means sometime before the heat death of the universe. The coffee in my hand had gone from hot to lukewarm to whatever temperature disappointment usually is, and I was seriously contemplating whether this was some kind of cosmic punishment for not going to the gym like I'd promised myself every January for the past decade. The thing about waiting for a tow truck is that it gives you way too much time to think about your life. Like, really think about it. Not the surface level, I should meal prep on Sundays kind of thinking, but the deep, existential, what the hell happened to that guy who thought he'd write a novel by 30 kind of thinking. I was wearing khakis, for God's sake. When did I become a khakis guy? I used to wear band t-shirts and think I was cool. Now I got excited about memory foam insoles and compared mortgage rates for fun. This is what marriage does to you. It slowly turns you into someone who owns a label maker and actually uses it. I took another sip of my tragic coffee and watched people stream in and out of Haven Plaza, all of them looking important and purposeful, probably heading to meetings about synergy and quarterly projections, and I wondered if any of them had cars that randomly combusted on public streets. Probably not. They probably drove sensible Hondas or flashy BMWs that actually worked. Meanwhile, my beloved Subaru, which I'd named Stella after some weird attachment issue I developed during the pandemic, had just betrayed me harder than when Netflix canceled my favorite show on a cliffhanger. That's when the revolving doors of Haven Plaza did their spinny thing, and out walked Lydia, my wife, my partner of 20 years. The woman I'd married when we were both young and stupid and thought love was enough to survive anything, including my failed attempts at learning guitar and her obsession with collecting decorative throw pillows that served no actual purpose. She looked good, I'll admit it, wearing that cream-colored blouse I'd complimented last month, her hair done in that way that meant she'd actually made an effort, not the usual mom bun she wore while yelling at our son to clean his room. She was practically glowing, radiating this energy that I definitely hadn't seen directed at me in at least 3 years. And wrapped around her like cheap gift wrap on Christmas morning was a man. Not just any man, though. That would have been too simple, too clean. No, the universe has a sixth sense of humor, because the man with his arm around my wife, looking at her like she'd just solved world hunger, was Darren Tate. Darren freaking Tate. The father of Chloe, who happened to be dating our son Owen. You know, the guy I'd made awkward small talk with at school functions, the guy I'd high-fived when our kids started dating, the guy who'd borrowed my hedge trimmer last summer and still hadn't returned it. They didn't see me. Why would they? I was just a sad middle-aged dude sitting on a curb with a dead car and deader dreams. They were too busy being wrapped up in each other, literally, looking like they'd just stepped out of some romantic comedy, except this wasn't a comedy. This was my actual life imploding in real time. Lydia was laughing at something Darren said, touching his chest in that flirty way that I remembered from when we first started dating, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and I still had a full head of hair. My brain did that thing where it short-circuits and goes through all 5 stages of grief in about 10 seconds. Denial. No, that's not her. Just someone who looks exactly like her. Anger. That hedge trimmer stealing bastard. Bargaining. Maybe they're just planning a surprise party. Depression. My car is dead, and so is my marriage. And finally, acceptance. Well, this is happening. Might as well document it. So naturally, I did what any rational person in the digital age would do. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, flipped it to selfie mode, and channeled my inner influencer. I positioned myself perfectly in frame, making sure my shocked, dead-inside expression was clearly visible, while in the background, slightly out of focus, but definitely identifiable, were Lydia and Darren, still wrapped around each other like they were auditioning for a cologne commercial. I snapped the photo. It was perfect. Chef's kiss. Pulitzer Prize-worthy documentation of the exact moment my marriage officially flatlined. Then I opened our family group chat, the one we'd ironically named The Grave Situation, 3 years ago when we thought we were funny, and I typed out the caption with the kind of petty energy that would make Shakespeare proud. Look who I found organizing the surprise engagement party. I hit send and watched the chaos unfold in real time. The typing bubbles appeared immediately. First, my son Owen, probably sitting in his dorm room, procrastinating on an essay. What engagement? 3 question marks. I could feel his panic through the screen. Then Eleanor, my mother-in-law, the woman who'd never quite forgiven me for not being a doctor or a lawyer. Call me now. All caps. She meant business. And finally, my sister Pam, who'd never liked Lydia and made it known at every Thanksgiving dinner. Knew she was sketchy since 2018. Pam never missed an opportunity to be right about something, even if that something was my life falling apart. My phone started vibrating like it was having a seizure. Calls, texts, messages flooding in faster than I could process. I could see Lydia across the street suddenly reaching for her phone, her face going from blissful to horrified in record time. Darren looked confused, probably wondering why she suddenly looked like she'd seen a ghost. I waved at them from across the street, gave them a big, sarcastic smile, and held up my coffee cup in a mock toast. The tow truck finally pulled up behind me, some guy named Carl with a fantastic mustache and a shirt that said, "I tow, therefore I am," which I appreciated. He looked at my smoking Subaru, then at me sitting there grinning like a maniac at my phone, and probably wondered what kind of breakdown he'd just rolled up to, mechanical or psychological. "Rough day?" Carl asked, hooking up Stella to his truck. "You have no idea," I said, watching the notification count on my phone climb past 50. "But I might have lost my car today, Carl." I definitely, absolutely, 100% lost my car. But you know what? I gained something way more valuable. Yeah. Carl raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" I looked at my phone, at the family group chat exploding with confusion and rage and shock, at the perfect selfie that would probably haunt Lydia for the rest of her life, and I smiled. Content, Carl. I gained content. And in today's economy, that's basically currency. Carl was still securing Stella to his tow truck, doing that thing where tow truck drivers pretend like they're NASA engineers preparing for a rocket launch, when I noticed Lydia starting to speedwalk across Main Street. Not a full run, because that would have been undignified, and Lydia was all about maintaining appearances even when her entire world was actively catching fire. No, this was that aggressive power walk that suburban moms perfect at the mall, the kind that says, "I'm in a hurry, but I'm still classy about it." Darren trailed behind her like a confused golden retriever who just got yelled at for eating the couch cushions. His face had gone from self-satisfied smirk to pure existential dread in what I can only describe as record time. It's amazing how quickly a man's confidence evaporates when he realizes he's been immortalized in a family group chat as that guy. You could literally watch him processing the implications, his brain doing the math on how thoroughly screwed he was. Spoiler alert, very screwed. Exceptionally screwed. The kind of screwed that requires a new area code and possibly a witness protection program. My phone was still having an absolute meltdown in my hand. The notification sounds had gone from occasional pings to a constant buzzing that made it feel like I was holding an angry beehive. More family members were joining the chat. Cousins I hadn't talked to since 2019, my uncle who only ever posted about his boat, even Lydia's brother Marcus who lived in Seattle and usually ignored all family drama. This was too good to miss. This was premium, grade A, organic family dysfunction, and everyone wanted a front row seat. "Martin." Lydia's voice cut through the street noise, high-pitched and desperate, the same tone she used when she couldn't find her phone and it was literally in her hand. "Martin, wait. We need to talk." I looked at Carl, who was watching this unfold with the kind of interest usually reserved for reality TV shows. "Carl, my man, how fast can you get this hooked up?" Because I'm about to be in a situation. Carl glanced at Lydia power walking toward us, then back at me, and something like understanding passed between us. Guy code. The universal language of men who've seen other men in crisis. Give me 2 minutes, he said, moving with suddenly increased urgency. I got you. Lydia was now about 30 feet away, her heels clicking on the pavement like a countdown timer to my doom. My phone started ringing. Her name lit up the screen, Lydia Redheart, with a heart emoji that now felt like a cruel joke. I stared at it for a moment, my thumb hovering over the answer button, and then I felt this surge of what I can only describe as pure, unadulterated spite mixed with the kind of clarity you get when you've been living in denial for so long that reality hits you like a freight train made of truth. I hit decline. And let me tell you, there is no satisfaction quite like declining a call from someone who absolutely, desperately needs you to answer. It's better than the last slice of pizza. Better than finding $20 in your old jacket. Better than when your team wins the Super Bowl. I felt like I'd just won an Olympic medal in the sport of petty revenge. She called again immediately. Decline. The satisfaction doubled. Martin. She was closer now, nearly at the truck. Darren had stopped about 10 feet behind her, apparently having decided that discretion was the better part of not getting punched in the face. Carl slammed the truck's gate shut. We're good to go, buddy. Hop in. I opened the passenger door of the tow truck and paused, looking back at Lydia. She'd stopped right at the curb, breathing hard. Her perfect hair slightly mussed, mascara just starting to run because apparently she'd worked up enough emotion to produce actual tears. For a split second, just a split second, I felt bad. 20 years of marriage doesn't just evaporate, even when you catch your wife wrapped around another man like discount sushi. But then my phone buzzed with another message in the group chat, this time from Owen. Dad, please tell me this is photoshopped. And just like that, the sympathy evaporated faster than my retirement savings probably had. Lydia, I called out, my hand on the truck door. I'd love to chat, really, but I've got plans. I'm thinking somewhere classy for our family meeting. Somewhere with ambience. Somewhere that really captures the absolute dumpster fire that is this moment. Martin, please, just let me explain. Applebee's, I said, cutting her off. I'm thinking Applebee's. Nothing says, let's discuss your affair, quite like half-price appetizers and fluorescent lighting. Bring Darren. Bring whoever else wants to witness this train wreck. I'll text you the time. I climbed into the truck before she could respond. Carl was already starting the engine, grinning like he'd just witnessed the best street theater of his life. As we pulled away, I could see Lydia in the side mirror, standing there on the curb, her phone pressed to her ear, probably calling me again. I pulled out my phone and switched it to Do Not Disturb. The modern equivalent of slamming a door in someone's face, and honestly, it felt great. Applebee's, huh? Carl said as we merged into traffic, my poor Stella dragging behind us like a mechanical corpse. That's cold, man. I respect it. Thanks, Carl. I'm trying something new. It's called dealing with my emotions in the most passive-aggressive way possible while maintaining plausible deniability. How's that working out? So far? Pretty damn good. As Carl navigated through downtown traffic, providing color commentary about his own divorce from 2017, she took the jet ski, Martin. The jet ski. I loved that thing more than I loved her, and that was the problem. I opened up our joint banking app. Yeah, we had one of those. The kind of modern marital trust exercise where you can both see every transaction, theoretically keeping everyone honest. Theoretically being the key word, because apparently Lydia had missed that memo. I scrolled through the recent transactions, and holy hell, it was like reading a crime novel written by someone with terrible judgment. Hotel receipts from the Grandview Inn, the nice one with the rooftop bar that I'd suggested we go to for our anniversary, which Lydia had said was too expensive. Apparently, it wasn't too expensive when Darren was footing half the bill. There were jewelry purchases from Tiffany & Company, and unless she'd suddenly developed a habit of buying herself diamond earrings without mentioning it, I had a pretty good idea who those were for. But the real kicker, the absolute chef's kiss of evidence, was right there on September 15th, a $300 dinner at L'Amour Bistro. On a Tuesday, the night we'd eaten leftover lasagna that was so old it had practically achieved sentience. I remembered that night specifically because I'd asked if she wanted to order takeout, and she'd said she wasn't hungry, and then disappeared into the bedroom early with a headache. Carl, I said, screenshotting everything with the efficiency of a forensic accountant. Do you know what my wife told me she was doing on September 15th? What's that? Book club. Carl snorted. Book club? That's what they're calling it these days. Apparently so. Although I'm pretty sure the only thing getting read that night was the menu at a French restaurant that charges $17 for a side of asparagus. I forwarded all the screenshots to my personal email, creating a folder that I titled, with no small amount of satisfaction, Exhibit A, The Idiocy Chronicles. Every hotel receipt, every suspicious dinner, every jewelry purchase that definitely wasn't for me because I'd gotten a HomeGoods gift card for my birthday. It was all there, time-stamped and categorized, a digital paper trail of betrayal that would have made any prosecutor weep with joy. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from my sister Pam. I'm coming to this Applebee's thing. I've been waiting years for this moment. Then Greg, my best friend, dude, I just saw the group chat. I'm bringing popcorn. Then Eleanor, my mother-in-law. I taught my daughter better than this. I'll be there. It was happening. I was accidentally orchestrating the most chaotic family dinner in the history of casual dining, and I hadn't even sent out a formal invitation yet. But you know what? If my marriage was going to explode, it might as well do it with an audience and mozzarella sticks. Where am I dropping you? Carl asked as we approached the auto shop. The Applebee's on 4th Street, I said. I've got a family reunion to plan, and apparently I'm the only one who didn't know we needed one. Applebee's on 4th Street has seen a lot of things. Birthday parties where kids smear frosting on booth seats. First dates that die slower than my Subaru. Drunk college students at 2 in the morning demanding nachos like their lives depend on it. But I'm pretty sure they'd never witnessed what I was about to orchestrate. A full-scale family intervention / public shaming / divorce preview. All set to the gentle ambience of Livin' on a Prayer playing through decades-old speakers. I walked in at exactly 6:30, still wearing my work khakis that now had grease stains from sitting on the curb, and approached the hostess stand where a 19-year-old girl named Ashley, according to her name tag, was scrolling through her phone with the kind of boredom that only comes from working in customer service. Hi, welcome to Applebee's, she said without looking up, her voice flat as Nebraska. How many in your party? 6, I said. And trust me when I tell you that you're going to want to give us the booth in the back corner. The one far away from normal, functioning families. We're going to be a situation. That got her attention. She looked up, probably expecting to see a drunk guy or someone wearing a questionable t-shirt, but instead found a middle-aged man with the kind of manic energy that comes from watching your entire life implode in a single afternoon. Something in my eyes must have communicated the chaos that was about to unfold, because she grabbed 6 menus without asking any follow-up questions and led me to the most isolated booth in the restaurant, tucked away near the bathrooms and the emergency exit. Perfect. Close to facilities for when people needed to cry or vomit or escape. Your server will be right with you, Ashley said, backing away slowly like I might be contagious. I slid into the booth and immediately ordered a beer from the waiter who appeared approximately 30 seconds later. His name was Derek, early 20s, with that specific look of someone working their way through community college and questioning all their life choices. I felt a kinship with him immediately. Just so you know, Derek, I said as he set down my Budweiser, this is going to get weird. Like, really weird. I'm having a family meeting about infidelity, betrayal, and possible fraud. So if you see things getting heated, maybe just give US space. And bring lots of mozzarella sticks. People are less likely to flip tables when they're eating fried cheese. Derek's eyes widened. Okay. I'll put in an order for the unlimited appetizers. You're a good man, Derek. Stay in school. Owen showed up first, which made sense because he only lived 15 minutes away at State University, probably cutting his evening study session short to witness whatever fresh hell his father had summoned him to. He was wearing his standard uniform of a college hoodie that had definitely seen better days, sweatpants that probably cost more than my first car, and the expression of someone who'd just been told their childhood was a lie. Which, to be fair, it kind of was. Dad, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Please tell me this is some kind of elaborate meme. Like, you're pranking the family. There's a hidden camera. We're all going to laugh about this tomorrow. I took a long sip of my beer and pushed my phone across the table, the selfie still pulled up in all its glory. Owen stared at it. his face going through more expressions than a yoga instructor demonstrating poses. Confusion, denial, horror, anger, and finally, resigned acceptance. "Oh my God," he muttered. "Oh my God, Dad. That's Mom. And that's Chloe's dad. That's Mr. Tate, the guy who gave me tips on my golf swing last summer." "Yep," I said, popping the P for emphasis. "The very same. Turns out he's been giving your mother tips too. Different kind of tips. More horizontal tips, if you catch my drift." "Dad, please, I'm begging you, do not finish that sentence." "Fair enough." The door chimed again, and Chloe walked in, and let me tell you, that girl looked like she'd been through her own personal apocalypse. Her mascara was streaked down her face in black rivers. Her hair was in a messy bun that looked less intentionally messy, and more, "I've been crying in my car for 45 minutes. And she was clutching her phone like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. When she spotted Owen, she let out a sound that was half sob, half hiccup, and practically threw herself into the booth next to him. "This can't be happening," she said, her voice cracking. "Owen, please tell me your dad is wrong. Please tell me my dad isn't, that he didn't." Owen put his arm around her, looking at me with eyes that said, "Help me. I'm 20 years old and not equipped for this level of family drama." I shrugged. Nobody was equipped for this. This was advanced-level dysfunction that required a PhD in therapy and possibly a documentary crew. "I'm sorry, Chloe," I said, genuinely meaning it. "But yeah, it's happening. Your dad and my wife are, well, they're a thing. Apparently have been for a while." She started crying harder, and Owen shot me a look that said, "You're the worst at comfort," which was fair because I absolutely was. My comfort style was more, "Here's some brutal honesty and a beer," than there, everything will be okay. That's when Darren and Lydia arrived, slinking through the Applebee's entrance like two teenagers who'd been caught toilet papering the principal's house. Lydia had changed clothes, I noticed. Gone was the cream blouse, replaced with a more casual sweater that screamed, "I'm just a regular person having a regular dinner. Nothing to see here." Darren was wearing a polo shirt and khakis, looking like he'd just come from a golf course where he'd spent the last hour contemplating mortality. They spotted our booth and hesitated. For a beautiful moment, I thought they might actually turn around and leave, but then Lydia squared her shoulders and marched over with the determination of someone about to face a firing squad. Darren followed, looking like he wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole. "Martin," Lydia started, her voice tight. "This is unnecessary. We could have talked about this at home, like adults." "Sit down," I said, cutting her off. My voice was calm, almost cheerful, which seemed to unsettle her more than if I'd been yelling. "We're all here now. Might as well make it official." They sat, Lydia next to me and Darren as far away as physically possible, while still technically being at the same table. The tension was so thick you could have cut it with one of Derek's butter knives. Speaking of Derek, he appeared with a massive plate of mozzarella sticks, took one look at our booth, and practically threw them on the table before speed walking away. Smart kid. He'd go far. The door chimed again. Eleanor swept in first, my mother-in-law, wearing a pantsuit that probably cost more than my car's funeral expenses and the expression of someone who'd been personally offended by the universe. Behind her was my sister Pam, in jeans and a t-shirt that said, "I was right about everything," which felt appropriate for the occasion. "Mother," Lydia said weakly as Eleanor approached. "Don't you mother me," Eleanor snapped, sliding into the booth and forcing everyone to scoot over. Pam grabbed a chair from a nearby table and planted herself at the end, arms crossed, looking like a prosecutor ready to deliver a closing argument. This was it. All the players assembled. The booth was crowded. The air was thick with tension and the smell of fried appetizers. And somewhere in the background, "Don't Stop Believin'" started playing, which felt either perfectly ironic or cosmically cruel. I pulled out my phone and opened up my carefully curated folder of evidence. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, credit card statements, the selfie that started it all. I laid it out like a poker player revealing a royal flush. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, adopting the tone of a game show host, "welcome to the Applebee's apocalypse. Tonight's special, the complete and total destruction of a 20-year marriage, served with a side of lies and a generous helping of betrayal." Lydia's face went pale. "Martin, please." "Oh, now you want to please? That's interesting." Because when you were spending $300 on dinner at L'Amour Bistro on a Tuesday night. You remember Tuesday nights, Lydia? When I thought you had book club? You didn't seem too concerned with pleasing anyone except Darren here. Chloe made a choking sound. Owen closed his eyes. Eleanor leaned forward, suddenly very interested. It's not what it looks like, Lydia said, which might be the most predictable line in the history of caught cheaters. I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind of laugh that borders on unhinged. Then you're doing it wrong, because it looks exactly like what it looks like. It looks like my wife has been having an affair with my son's girlfriend's father while using our joint bank account to fund romantic getaways. Even Derek, who'd been hovering near the kitchen, refused to approach our table. The surrounding booths had gone quiet. We'd become dinner theater, and the show was just getting started. Just when I thought this disaster couldn't possibly get any more absurd, just when I was settling into the comfortable rhythm of public humiliation and righteous anger, Darren cleared his throat. And not just any throat clear. This was the kind of deliberate, attention-seeking throat clear that politicians do before announcing they're running for office, or that your high school principal did before explaining why the cafeteria was serving pizza that looked like cardboard covered in ketchup. Everyone turned to look at him. Even Derek, our brave waiter, paused mid-retreat to see what fresh hell was about to be unleashed. It's not an affair, Darren said, and I swear to God. He said it with the confidence of a man who actually believed what was coming out of his mouth. It's business. Lydia and I, we're starting a company together. The table went silent. Not the peaceful kind of silent, but the kind of silent that happens right before a bomb goes off in an action movie. I could hear the Katy Perry song playing over the speakers. I could hear someone at another table asking for extra ranch dressing. I could hear my own brain trying to process what Darren had just said and coming up completely empty. Business, I repeated slowly, like I was testing out a foreign word. Business. Yes, Lydia jumped in, apparently seeing this as her lifeline. That's what we've been trying to tell you, Martin. It's a real estate venture. Darren has incredible connections in commercial properties, and I have the marketing background. From selling scented candles on Etsy? Pam interjected, because my sister has never met a moment she couldn't make more savage. Lydia shot her a look that could have melted steel. From working in client relations before Owen was born, thank you very much. So let me get this straight, I said, leaning back in the booth and crossing my arms. You're telling me that all those hotel visits, those expensive dinners, those jewelry purchases, that was all just business? Networking events, Darren said, nodding like he'd just solved world hunger. The hotel was hosting a real estate conference. The dinners were with potential investors. The jewelry was a closing gift, Lydia finished. It's standard practice in high-end real estate. Owen looked at Chloe. Chloe looked at Owen. They both looked at me like they were watching a tennis match played by people who'd forgotten what sport they were playing. Okay, I said, adopting my most reasonable voice, the one I used when explaining to IT why I'd clicked on a phishing email. So you're business partners. That's your story. It's not a story. It's the truth, Lydia said. And here's the thing. She almost sounded convincing. She had that tone down, that perfect blend of indignation and sincerity that she used to use when explaining why she'd bought another throw pillow we didn't need. We were going to tell you about it eventually. We just wanted to get everything properly established first. Properly established, I echoed. Right? And the arm around the waist thing I witnessed? That was what? A firm handshake that got out of control. Darren actually had the audacity to look sheepish. We'd just signed the LLC papers. We were celebrating. And then, and this is where it gets truly beautiful, he reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a folder. An actual manila folder, like this was some kind of business pitch and not a family implosion at an Applebee's. He opened it with the flourish of a magician revealing his final trick and slid it across the table. There, in official-looking letterhead and legal jargon that made my eyes want to bleed, were the incorporation papers for Walker Tate Realty LLC. See, Darren said, pointing at the document like it was evidence of his innocence instead of his stupidity. It's completely legitimate. We filed with the state 3 weeks ago. We have a business plan, projected earnings, everything. I picked up the papers, not because I cared about their business plan, but because I needed a moment to process the sheer audacity of what I was witnessing. These two had actually registered a business. An actual LLC, with official documents and everything. And they were using this as their defense, Like filing paperwork somehow made sneaking around behind my back totally okay. That's when I noticed it. A small detail that made my entire horrible day suddenly worth it. Hey Darren, I said casually, flipping to the second page. Quick question about your completely legitimate business venture. What address did you use for the company registration? He blinked. What? The address. Right here. I pointed at the document. For Walker Tate Realty, LLC. What address is listed? I watched his face change as he remembered. It was like watching a cartoon character realize they'd run off a cliff. That moment of suspended animation before gravity takes over. Oh God, Lydia whispered. Want to read it out loud? Or should I? I asked, my smile getting wider. Because it says right here, clear as day, 847 Maple Drive. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, is my house. Our house. The house we bought together with the mortgage that's in both our names. Eleanor leaned forward, suddenly very interested. They used your home address? They used our home address. I confirmed, feeling like Christmas had come early. For their secret business venture, which, according to state law regarding LLCs registered to residential addresses, means that any legal entity operating out of that location has to be disclosed to all property owners, which would be me. And Lydia. Pam started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a full-on cackle that made other diners turn and stare. Oh my God, Martin. Do you know what this means? I do, I said, still reading through the documents. It means that technically, legally, I'm involved in their business. I'm not just a shareholder in their stupidity, I'm a stakeholder. Any profits? I have a claim. Any losses? They affect my property. Any legal issues? They come to my door. Literally. Darren's face had gone from tan to an interesting shade of gray. That's not, we didn't mean. Congratulations, Darren, I said, raising my beer in a mock toast. You just made me a partner in your affair. Or sorry, your business venture. Which, by the way, makes all those hotel receipts and dinner expenses potential business deductions on our joint tax return. So really, you've been doing me a favor. How thoughtful. Lydia looked like she wanted to crawl under the table and die. Martin, we can change the address. We can file an amendment. Oh, you absolutely should, I agreed. But the fun thing about official documents is that they create a paper trail. A time-stamped, government-recorded paper trail that shows exactly when you registered this business, which coincidentally aligns perfectly with when all those mysterious charges started appearing on our credit card. Owen had his head in his hands. Chloe was crying again, but now it seemed less like sadness and more like the kind of tears that come from witnessing something so ridiculous your brain can't handle it. Eleanor had pulled out her phone and was texting someone, probably her lawyer, because despite her many flaws, my mother-in-law didn't mess around when it came to legal matters. So let me make sure I understand the situation. I continued, really warming up now. You two started a real estate company, using my house as the business address, funded partially with marital assets from the joint account. And you thought the best way to handle this was to just not tell me? That was the plan. We were going to tell you. Lydia insisted weakly. When? At the company Christmas party? Were you going to send me a LinkedIn request? Darren tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. Look, Martin, I know this looks bad. It doesn't just look bad, Darren. It is bad. You borrowed my hedge trimmer and never returned it. And now you've somehow managed to make me an unwilling participant in whatever midlife crisis you're having. Do you know what the worst part is? The absolute worst part. Everyone waited. Even Derek had stopped pretending to clean the nearby table. The company name, I said. Walker Tate Realty. You used her maiden name. Lydia Walker. Not Graves. Not the name she's had for 20 years. The name that's on our mortgage, our bank accounts, our son's birth certificate. You went with Walker. The implications hung in the air like a bad smell. This wasn't just a business venture. It was a preview of a future where Lydia wasn't a Graves anymore. Where she'd gone back to being a Walker, probably with Tate tagged on the end once their respective divorces went through. Eleanor broke the silence. A business venture, she said slowly, her voice dripping with disdain. Is that what we're calling it? Because the only thing you two seem to be flipping is your moral values. Pam high-fived her, which was possibly the first time in history those two had agreed on anything. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. You know what? Keep your LLC. Keep your business plan. Keep whatever delusion is keeping you going. But just so we're clear, You've now given me documented proof of misuse of marital funds for a business venture I never consented to, using my property as collateral without my permission. So thanks for that. My lawyer is going to love you. Your lawyer? Lydia's voice cracked. Oh yeah, I said cheerfully. Did I forget to mention? I called Greg on the way here. He's referring me to Veronica Chase. You know, the one who handled the Morrison divorce? The one who's famous for absolutely destroying cheating spouses in court. The color drained from both their faces. Derek finally approached with the check, set it in the middle of the table, and practically ran away. I grabbed it, looked at the total, and smiled. Business dinner. This one's on Walker Tate Realty. The Applebee's dinner ended exactly how you'd expect. With Lydia storming out, Darren scurrying behind her like a scolded puppy, and me sitting there with a half-eaten plate of mozzarella sticks and the kind of satisfaction that only comes from watching your enemies realize they've played themselves. Eleanor left shortly after, but not before hugging me and whispering, "I always knew you were too good for her," which was rich considering she'd spent the last 20 years implying I wasn't good enough. Pam stuck around long enough to help me finish the appetizers and tell me at least 17 times that she'd called it in 2018, which I was starting to think might be her new catchphrase. Owen and Chloe left together, both looking like they'd aged about 10 years in the span of 90 minutes. My son had given me this look before he walked out. Not quite approval, not quite disappointment, but something in between that said, "Dad, I get it, but also, did you have to go that hard?" To which my internal response was, "Yes, Owen, yes, I absolutely did have to go that hard, because when life gives you lemons, you don't make lemonade. You squeeze those lemons directly into the open wounds of people who've wronged you." I drove home in a rental car that smelled like stale French fries and regret, courtesy of the auto shop where Stella was currently on life support, and pulled into my driveway around 9 p.m. The house was dark, empty. Lydia had apparently decided not to come home, which was fine by me because I'd already decided to change the locks tomorrow morning. Was that legally sketchy? Probably. Did I care? Not even a little bit. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion, and figured my marriage exploding in spectacular fashion qualified as special enough. Then I called Greg. Greg Martinez had been my best friend since college, back when we were both young and stupid and thought we'd be rock stars or tech billionaires or literally anything other than what we actually became. Him a divorce attorney, me a marketing director for industrial cleaning supplies. Greg had been through 2 divorces himself, which either made him the worst person to give relationship advice or the best person to handle my legal carnage. I was betting on the latter. He answered on the second ring. Dude, I've been reading the family group chat for the last 3 hours. This is the most entertainment I've had since the Hendersons' divorce when the wife tried to claim the husband's Star Wars collection as marital assets. It gets better, I said, taking a long pull from my beer. They registered a business, an LLC, using my house as the address, without telling me. Silence. Then, are you serious right now? Dead serious. I have the incorporation papers. They called it Walker Tate Realty. Lydia went back to her maiden name for it, and everything. Greg let out a low whistle. Martin, my friend, my brother, my fellow survivor of feminine chaos. Do you understand what you've just handed me? This isn't just infidelity. This is financial malfeasance. This is misuse of marital property. This is the kind of case that makes lawyers wake up in the morning with a smile. So you're saying I'm not crazy for being pissed? Crazy? Martin, if you weren't pissed, I'd check you for a pulse. Look, I can't take your case because conflict of interest. I'm your friend, and that gets messy. But I know someone who will absolutely eat this alive. Her name's Veronica Chase. Ever heard of her? I racked my brain. The name sounded familiar. Wait, isn't she the one who handled the Morrison divorce? The very same. Jessica Morrison walked away with the house, both cars, the vacation property in Colorado, and full custody of their 3 dogs. Rick Morrison now lives in a studio apartment above a dry cleaner and drives a 2003 Honda Civic. What did Rick do to deserve that? He cheated on Jessica with her personal trainer and then tried to hide assets in his brother's name. Veronica found everything. And I mean everything. She's like a bloodhound mixed with a shark mixed with that teacher from elementary school who always knew when you were lying about your homework. That sounded exactly like what I needed. Can you get me a meeting? I'll text you her number right now. But Martin, I gotta warn you, She's expensive. Like, really expensive. We're talking retainer fees that could have paid for a decent used car. I thought about Lydia and Darren, about their secret business venture, about 20 years of marriage going up in flames while they played real estate tycoon with my money. Greg, at this point, I'd pay her in organs if she could guarantee results. That's the spirit. Destroy your life savings to destroy your ex-wife's life. It's the American way. We talked for another 20 minutes, Greg giving me a rundown of what to expect, what documents to gather, what mistakes to avoid. By the time we hung up, I had a game plan and a text message with Veronica Chase's contact information. The message from Greg just said, "Tell her I sent you. And God have mercy on Lydia's soul." I texted Veronica that night, not expecting a response until morning, but apparently divorce lawyers keep vampire hours because she replied within 10 minutes. Greg filled me in. Free consultation tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bring everything. Everything turned out to be a lot more than I expected. I spent the next 3 hours compiling documents like I was preparing for the world's most depressing audit. Bank statements going back 2 years. Credit card bills. The incorporation papers for Walker Tate Realty that Darren had so helpfully provided. Screenshots of every suspicious charge. That selfie from Main Street that had started this whole avalanche. Text messages. Emails. I even found old receipts stuffed in drawers that Lydia had been terrible about throwing away, which now served as a beautiful paper trail of deception. By midnight, I had assembled what could only be described as a dossier worthy of a federal investigation. I put it all in a folder, a much better folder than Darren's sad manila one, and labeled it The Complete and Total Destruction of My Marriage, a documentary. I couldn't sleep, obviously. Who could? So I did what any rational person does at 1 a.m. when their life is falling apart. I deep cleaned the kitchen, scrubbed the counters, organized the pantry, alphabetized the spices, which Lydia had always said was psychotic behavior, but now felt like the most sane thing I'd done all day. Control the things you can control, right? I couldn't control my wife having an affair, but I could absolutely control whether the paprika came before the pepper. At 9:45 a.m. the next morning, I walked into Veronica Chase's office building downtown, clutching my folder of evidence and running on approximately 90 minutes of stress-induced sleep and 4 cups of coffee. The office was on the 15th floor of a building that screamed, "Successful people work here, and you probably can't afford them." Glass walls, modern furniture, a receptionist who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Everything was chrome and leather and the kind of aesthetic that says, "We win cases and look good doing it." The receptionist, whose nameplate read Miranda, smiled at me with the practiced warmth of someone who deals with emotional wrecks daily. "Mr. Graves? Miss Chase is ready for you. Conference room B, down the hall on your right." I walked down a hallway lined with framed news articles about Veronica's cases. Local attorney secures record settlement. Chase wins landmark custody case. Divorce lawyer named one of city's most influential. This woman wasn't just good. She was legendary. Conference room B was all windows overlooking the city, with a table that could seat 12 and probably cost more than my annual salary. And at the head of that table sat Veronica Chase. She was maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun that meant business, wearing a suit that probably cost what I spent on groceries in 3 months. But it was her eyes that got me. Sharp, calculating, the eyes of someone who'd seen every trick in the divorce playbook and invented a few of her own. "Mr. Graves," she said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Greg speaks highly of you. Have a seat. Let's see what we're working with." I sat down and slid the folder across to her. "Fair warning, it's a lot." She opened it, and I watched her face as she went through the contents. The bank statements, the hotel receipts, the incorporation papers, that beautiful, damning selfie. Her expression didn't change much, but I caught the slight quirk of her lips, the way her eyes lit up when she hit the LLC documents. After about 10 minutes of silence while she reviewed everything, she looked up at me and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a predatory smile. The smile of a lawyer who'd just been handed a case, so perfect it might as well have been gift-wrapped. "Mr. Graves," she said, leaning back in her chair and steepling her fingers. "You've just made my month. They funded a joint business venture using marital assets, without disclosure, and registered it to your property. That's what the papers say." "Oh, we're going to feast," she said, and there was genuine joy in her voice. We're going to absolutely feast. Tell me, do you have a prenup? We do, actually. Her dad insisted on it before we got married. I never really read the fine print. Do you have a copy? Somewhere in my filing cabinet at home. What? Veronica's smile got wider. Because prenups often have clauses about infidelity and financial misconduct. If yours does, and I suspect it might, given that it was drafted by Eleanor Walker's attorney, we're not just looking at a divorce. We're looking at a complete dismantling of your wife's financial future. I sat back in my chair, letting that sink in. How complete are we talking? That depends on what's in the prenup. But based on what I'm seeing here, the house is yours. The majority of assets are yours. And if we can prove that marital funds were used for their business venture without your consent, which we absolutely can, she might be liable for paying you back every penny, plus damages. For the first time since yesterday afternoon, I felt something other than anger or betrayal or exhaustion. I felt hope. Vindictive, petty, absolutely glorious hope. When do we start? I asked. Veronica pulled out a contract. Right now. Signing a retainer agreement with a divorce attorney is kind of like signing a deal with the devil, except the devil wears Armani and has a paralegal named Josh who brings you excellent coffee. I scribbled my signature on about 15 different pages while Veronica explained what she called the strategy, which sounded less like a legal plan and more like a military operation designed to leave no survivors. First things first, she said, sliding my folder back to me, now with color-coded tabs that made it look official and terrifying. We need to get that prenup. Today. Right now, if possible. Everything hinges on what's in that document. If your father-in-law was as thorough as I suspect, we're going to find clauses that'll make your wife wish she'd just stayed home with her book club. Her fake book club, I corrected. Her fake book club. Veronica agreed with a smile that could cut glass. Josh will go with you to retrieve it. I don't want you going home alone in case Lydia decides to show up and things get complicated. Plus, Josh has experience in document retrieval, which is a fancy way of saying he knows how to find things people are trying to hide. Josh appeared in the doorway like he'd been summoned by mentioning his name. He was maybe 30, wearing business casual, with the kind of eager energy that suggested he either loved his job or was heavily caffeinated. Possibly both. Ready when you are, Mr. Graves. 20 minutes later, Josh and I were standing in my home office, a room that had slowly transformed from Martin's creative space to the place where we store things we don't want to look at, while I dug through a filing cabinet that hadn't been organized since Obama's first term. There were tax returns from 2015, car insurance documents for vehicles we didn't own anymore, and a truly alarming number of receipts from Home Depot that I'd apparently been saving for no reason. How's your filing system? Josh asked diplomatically, watching me pull out what appeared to be a warranty for a toaster we'd thrown away in 2019. It's more of a filing suggestion, I admitted. Lydia always said I was terrible with paperwork. She usually handled all the important documents. Which is ironic, Josh said, considering she's now on the wrong end of those documents. I found the prenup in the third drawer I checked, stuffed inside a folder labeled wedding stuff, along with our marriage certificate, some dried flowers that had probably been meaningful at some point, and a CD of photos from our reception that I'd never actually looked at. The prenup was thick, like suspiciously thick, 30-some pages of legal jargon that my 23-year-old self had signed without reading because I was in love and stupid and thought prenups were just formalities that rich people did. Josh took it reverently, like I'd just handed him the Declaration of Independence. Perfect. Miss Chase is going to love this. Back at Veronica's office, I watched her read through the prenup with the intensity of someone decoding enemy transmissions. She had a yellow highlighter in one hand and was making little notes in the margins, occasionally letting out satisfied hums that made me increasingly curious about what she was finding. After about 20 minutes, she looked up at me with an expression that can only be described as pure, unbridled legal joy. Martin, did you know your father-in-law was a corporate attorney before he retired? Yeah, he worked for some big firm downtown. What? Because he drafted this prenup like he was protecting Fort Knox. This thing has clauses I haven't seen since the 1990s. It's beautiful. It's comprehensive. She paused for effect, absolutely devastating for anyone stupid enough to cheat. She turned the document around and pointed to a section on page 17, highlighted in bright yellow. Read this. I leaned forward and squinted at the legal language. In the event that either party engages in proven adultery or infidelity during the course of the marriage, all asset protections afforded to the offending party under this agreement shall be rendered null and void. Furthermore, the offending party forfeits all claims to property acquired during the marriage, including but not limited to real estate, vehicles, investments, and business interests. I read it twice, then a third time. Holy shit. Holy shit indeed, Veronica agreed. Your father-in-law basically built in a self-destruct button for anyone dumb enough to cheat. And your wife just hit that button with both hands while juggling dynamite. I had no idea this was in here. Most people don't read prenups thoroughly. They're boring, they're long, and everyone's in love and thinks they'll be together forever. But your father-in-law knew better. He protected you without you even knowing it. She flipped to another page. It gets better. Section 12, subsection C. Any business ventures initiated by either party using marital funds must be disclosed in writing to both parties within 30 days of inception. Failure to do so constitutes financial misconduct and subjects the offending party to immediate asset forfeiture. I felt like I'd just won a lottery I didn't know I'd entered. Walker Tate Realty was registered 3 weeks ago. She never told me. She never told you. Veronica repeated, making another note. Which means she violated the prenup twice. Once with the infidelity, once with the business. Martin, I'm going to be honest with you. In my 23 years of practice, I've rarely seen a case this clean. Your wife basically handed us an instruction manual for destroying her in court. Josh, who'd been quietly taking notes in the corner, actually laughed. It's like she studied how to lose everything in a divorce and followed it step by step. What about the house? I asked. She's going to fight for it, right? Veronica shook her head. She can try, but she won't win. The house was purchased during the marriage with your income as the primary source. I saw the mortgage documents in your folder. And now, thanks to this prenup clause, she's forfeited any claim to it. The house is yours. The cars are yours. Your retirement accounts are yours. She'll be lucky to walk away with her clothes and that Etsy candle business she never got off the ground. This feels too good to be true. It's true, I promise you. I've already started drafting the filing papers. We'll submit everything to the court by end of week. But I need one more thing from you. What's that? Call your mother-in-law. Eleanor, right? I need to know if she's willing to testify about Lydia's character and the circumstances of the affair. In-law testimony can be powerful, especially when it's the wife's own mother turning against her. I honestly didn't know what Eleanor would say. She'd been supportive at Applebee's, sure, but testifying in court was a whole different level. I can try, but I'm not sure. My phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen like the universe was listening. Speak of the devil, I muttered, answering. Eleanor, hi, I was just. Martin, where are you? Her voice was crisp, businesslike. Not angry, but definitely serious. I'm at my attorney's office. What? Good. I need her information. I'm coming down there. We need to talk about my daughter's spectacular stupidity and how I'm going to help you take her to the cleaners. I blinked, looked at Veronica, who'd clearly heard every word through the phone. You want to help me? Martin, I raised that girl better than this. I taught her about integrity, about loyalty, about not being an idiot who throws away a good marriage for some golf-playing real estate wannabe. She's made her bed with Egyptian cotton sheets purchased with your money, and now she can lie in it. Alone. In an apartment. That she rents. Eleanor, save it. I'm 10 minutes away. Have your lawyer ready. We're going to war, and I'm bringing ammunition. She hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone like it had just turned into an exotic animal. Well, Veronica said, looking extremely pleased. I think that answers your question about testimony. True to her word, Eleanor walked into the office exactly 10 minutes later wearing a power suit that screamed, I've destroyed better people than you before breakfast, and carrying a leather portfolio that looked expensive enough to require its own insurance. She shook Veronica's hand with the grip of someone who'd spent 40 years in business negotiations and wasn't impressed easily. Miss Chase, I presume. I'm Eleanor Walker. Let me be clear about why I'm here. My daughter has been a fool. An absolute fool. Martin is a good man. Not perfect. Mind you, his organizational skills are abysmal, but good. Loyal. Hardworking. and she threw him away for a man who can't even return borrowed garden equipment. The hedge trimmer, I said. The hedge trimmer, Eleanor confirmed. Among other things. Miss Chase, I will testify. I will provide character references. I will do whatever it takes to ensure Martin gets what he deserves, which is everything. My daughter gets the shame, the embarrassment, and a very expensive lesson about fidelity. Veronica was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Mrs. Walker, it's an honor. I've handled many divorces, but I've never had the mother of the bride on the opposing side. First time for everything, Eleanor said, settling into a chair. Now let's discuss strategy. I assume you found the prenup clause? The adultery clause? Oh yes. Good. That was my late husband's masterpiece. He always said, Eleanor, if our daughter ever does something stupid, at least she'll be poor while doing it. Turns out he was a prophet. We spent the next hour planning what Veronica called the most beautiful legal destruction she'd supervised in years. Eleanor provided intimate details about Lydia and Darren's relationship timeline, including dinner parties where they'd been suspiciously friendly and business trips that aligned with the hotel receipts. She had dates, witnesses, even photographs from family gatherings where you could see them making eyes at each other in the background. You've been documenting this? I asked, impressed and slightly horrified. A mother knows, Eleanor said simply. I've known for months. I was hoping she'd come to her senses. She didn't. So here we are. By the time Eleanor left, with promises to ruin my daughter's life in the most loving way possible, Veronica had assembled what she called an airtight case that could survive a nuclear blast. Martin, she said as I gathered my things to leave, go home. Relax. Maybe buy yourself something nice. Because in about 2 weeks, you're going to be a very vindicated, very divorced, very satisfied man. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in months. Turns out, being disorganized with paperwork pays off when your wife doesn't know about the legal landmine she's about to step on. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for Veronica to assemble what she lovingly called the nuclear option, and for Lydia to realize she'd backed herself into a corner made of her own terrible decisions and even worse attempts at covering them up. 2 weeks of me living in my house alone, changing the locks like I'd threatened, eating cereal for dinner because I didn't have the energy to cook, and watching Max the dog follow me around like he knew something big was happening but couldn't quite figure out what. The settlement meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Thursday at Veronica's office, in the same conference room where I'd first learned that my father-in-law had accidentally made me lawsuit-proof. The email invitation had gone out 5 days prior, and I'd watched Lydia's responses evolve through the stages of grief in real time. First came denial. This is unnecessary. We can work this out at home. Then anger. You're being vindictive and cruel. Bargaining. Can we at least talk before lawyers get involved? Depression. No response for 48 hours. And finally, acceptance. I'll be there. With representation. I arrived 15 minutes early because punctuality suddenly felt important, like being on time was somehow connected to winning. Veronica was already there, looking like she'd stepped off the set of a legal drama, surrounded by stacks of color-coded documents that made my original folder look like amateur hour. Josh was there too, along with another paralegal named Sarah who apparently specialized in asset documentation, which seemed to be lawyer code for finding every penny your spouse tried to hide. How are you feeling? Veronica asked as I sat down at what I'd come to think of as my side of the massive conference table. Like I'm about to watch a car crash in slow motion, I admitted. Except I'm not in the car this time. That's the spirit. Remember, you don't have to say much. In fact, I'd prefer if you said as little as possible. Let me do the talking. You just sit there and look like the wronged husband you are. I can do that. I've been practicing that look in the mirror. How's it coming? Let's just say I've perfected the art of looking disappointed but not surprised. At 9:58 a.m., the conference room door opened, and in walked Lydia with her attorney, a nervous-looking guy named Philip something or other who couldn't have been more than 35 and had the demeanor of someone who'd already realized he was outgunned. I'd looked him up after Lydia sent his information. He specialized in amicable divorces and collaborative family law, which was adorable considering there was nothing amicable or collaborative about what was about to happen. This was his first mistake, bringing a mediator to a knife fight. Lydia looked terrible, and I don't mean that in a petty way. I mean, she genuinely looked like the last 2 weeks had been rough. Her hair wasn't done with her usual precision. She had circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, and she was wearing a blazer that I recognized from 5 years ago, which meant she was either making a statement about financial responsibility or she'd run out of better options. My money was on the latter. Martin, she said quietly as she sat down across from me. Lydia, I replied, matching her tone but adding absolutely zero warmth to it. Philip sat down next to her, pulling out his own folder that was considerably thinner than Veronica's stack. He attempted a professional smile. Good morning, everyone. I'm Philip Brennan, representing Mrs. Graves. I believe we can handle this matter quickly and fairly without unnecessary conflict. Veronica smiled back, the kind of smile a shark gives right before it attacks. Mr. Brennan, how lovely. I'm Veronica Chase, and I think we have very different definitions of fair. The temperature in the room dropped about 15 degrees. Veronica slid the first document across the table. Our settlement proposal, professionally bound with tabs and highlights and the kind of formatting that said, "We've thought of everything, including things you didn't know existed." Philip picked it up, and I watched his face change as he read through it. Page 1, confusion. Page 2, concern. Page 3, barely concealed panic. This is quite aggressive, he said carefully, looking at Lydia, who'd gone pale. It's quite fair, Veronica corrected. Based on the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties in 2005, which includes specific clauses regarding adultery and financial misconduct, both of which Mrs. Graves has violated. The settlement reflects those violations. Let me summarize for everyone. Veronica continued, clearly enjoying herself. Mr. Graves retains the house at 847 Maple Drive, as it was purchased primarily with his income, and Mrs. Graves has forfeited her claim due to prenup violations. He retains 70% of all marital assets, including savings accounts, investments, and retirement funds. He retains both vehicles currently registered in his name. He retains full ownership of Max, the family dog. Mrs. Graves may keep her personal belongings, her Pilates studio membership, which expires in, she checked her notes, 3 months, and whatever dignity she can salvage from this situation. This is robbery, Lydia hissed, finally finding her voice. Her hands were shaking slightly as she gripped the document. You can't just take everything, Martin. 20 years of marriage has to count for something. I leaned back in my chair, channeling every ounce of calm I could muster. You're right, Lydia. 20 years should count for something. But you spent the last 6 months deciding it didn't. You started a business behind my back, using our money and our house. You violated the prenup your father wrote specifically to prevent this exact situation. So no, this isn't robbery. This is karma, and apparently, she works on weekends. Philip cleared his throat. Miss Chase, surely we can negotiate something more equitable. My client is entitled to. Your client is entitled to exactly what the prenuptial agreement says she's entitled to, which is nothing, Veronica interrupted smoothly. In fact, we're being generous by not pursuing additional damages for the misuse of marital funds in the establishment of Walker Tate Realty. We could argue that Mrs. Graves owes Mr. Graves reimbursement for every penny spent on that venture, plus interest, but we're willing to waive that in exchange for a swift, uncontested settlement. She slid another document across the table. These are the financial records showing every transaction related to the business venture. Hotels, dinners, jewelry, the LLC registration fees. All paid for with marital assets from joint accounts. All undisclosed. All violations of the prenup's transparency clause. Lydia was reading through the settlement now, her face getting paler with each page. The dog? You're taking Max. You're allergic to dogs, I pointed out. You've been taking Claritin daily for 5 years because of Max. Why would you want him? Because he's ours. He's family. So was I said quietly. Didn't stop you from trading me in for a guy who wears polo shirts unironically and hasn't returned my hedge trimmer. Philip tried again, desperately. Ms. Chase, perhaps we could discuss the asset division. 70-30 seems excessive when the marriage lasted 2 decades. Mr. Brennan, Veronica said, her voice taking on an edge that could cut through steel. Let me be very clear about what happens if we don't settle today. If we go to court, I will present this prenup, these financial records, testimony from Eleanor Walker. Yes, Mrs. Graves' own mother, Photographs, documented timeline of the affair, and evidence of your client's attempt to hide assets in a business registered to her husband's property without his knowledge. The judge will not be sympathetic. The settlement will be worse. And you'll bill your client for the privilege of watching her lose in a very public, very expensive trial. Philip looked at Lydia. Lydia looked at the settlement. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw something that might have been regret or might have been anger at getting caught. Hard to tell with her. What about spousal support? Philip asked weakly. No, Veronica said simply. The prenup waives all spousal support in cases of proven adultery, which we've proven extensively, with receipts. The room went quiet except for the sound of the air conditioning and Philip frantically scribbling notes on a legal pad. Lydia was staring at the document like it might suddenly rewrite itself if she looked at it hard enough. This is because of Darren, isn't it? She said finally, looking up at me. You're punishing me because of him. No, Lydia. I'm holding you accountable because of you. Darren's just the idiot you chose to blow up our marriage with. Could have been anyone, really. You made the choice. Multiple choices, actually, over several months. This is just the consequence. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said, cutting her off. You hurt me. You hurt Owen. You embarrassed our family. And you did it all while using my money and my house to fund your new adventure. So forgive me if I'm not feeling particularly generous with the settlement. Philip whispered something to Lydia. She shook her head. He whispered more urgently. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and I watched 20 years of marriage, of shared history, of inside jokes and family dinners, and all those little moments that make up a life together. I watched all of it crumble into dust right there in that conference room that smelled like stale coffee and broken promises and expensive leather furniture. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll sign. Veronica produced a pen like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. Excellent choice. The actual signing took about 15 minutes, with Philip reviewing each page one more time like he might find a loophole hidden in the margins, but Veronica's work was airtight. Lydia signed her name on each designated line, her signature getting smaller and more defeated with each page. When it was done, Philip gathered their copies and stood up with the defeated energy of a lawyer who knew he'd just been thoroughly outmaneuvered. We'll file these with the court by end of day, Veronica said pleasantly. Divorce should be finalized in about 6 weeks. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Brennan. Philip nodded curtly and headed for the door. Lydia stood up slowly, clutching her purse like a life preserver. She looked at me one more time. I hope you're happy, she said. I'm not, I replied honestly. But I will be. Eventually. She left without another word, Philip trailing behind her like a sad balloon losing air. The door clicked shut, and the conference room went silent again. Veronica leaned back in her chair, looking supremely satisfied. Well, that went exactly as planned. Is it always that brutal? I asked. Only when one party is spectacularly stupid, she said cheerfully. Your ex-wife just signed away her financial future because she thought business venture was a good excuse for an affair. Congratulations, Martin. You're officially on your way to being single, solvent, and satisfied. I sat there for a moment, letting it all sink in. It was over. Not the marriage that had died weeks ago on Main Street, but the legal part, the messy part, the part where everything gets divided up and cataloged and reduced to signatures on paper. Can I ask you something? I said to Veronica. Of course. Do you ever feel bad? Like destroying people's lives for a living? She considered this. I don't destroy lives, Martin. I help people escape from lives that were already destroyed by someone else's choices. Your wife destroyed your marriage. I just made sure she paid for it. There's a difference. Fair point. I left the office that afternoon with signed settlement papers, a timeline for the divorce, and the strange, hollow feeling that comes from winning something you never wanted to fight for in the first place. 6 weeks. That's how long it takes for a divorce to be finalized in our state. Assuming nobody contests anything and both parties behave like rational adults who aren't trying to set each other's lives on fire. 6 weeks of existing in legal limbo, of being married but not really, of explaining to confused relatives that yes, it's happening. No, we're not getting back together, and no, I don't want to hear about their cousin who reconciled after finding their spouse in a similar situation. The divorce became official on a Tuesday, which felt appropriately mundane for something that was supposed to be life-changing. I got the notification via email, a PDF attachment with official court stamps and judge signatures and language that essentially said, "Congratulations, you're no longer legally bound to someone who betrayed you." No ceremony, no dramatic moment, just a digital document that arrived while I was microwaving leftover pizza for lunch and wondering if eating breakfast food for dinner and dinner food for breakfast counted as having a personality. I called Greg immediately. "It's done. I'm officially unmarried. How do you feel?" he asked, and I could hear the concern in his voice, that careful tone people use when they're not sure if you're about to celebrate or have a breakdown. "Honestly, hungry. I'm thinking steaks. Big, expensive steaks that I don't have to justify to anyone." "You in?" "Always. I'll bring beer. The good stuff, not that domestic garbage you usually buy." "Excuse me. Budweiser is an American institution. Budweiser is what you drink when you've given up on flavor. I'll be there at 7. Fire up the grill." The grill. My beautiful, ridiculous, completely unnecessary propane behemoth that I'd bought 3 years ago over Lydia's protest that it was too big and not practical. "And Martin, why do you need a grill with a side burner and a warming rack and LED lights?" "Because I wanted it, Lydia. Because sometimes a man needs to cook meat on a machine that looks like it could launch satellites if you push the right buttons." I kept the grill in the settlement. Veronica had actually written it into the agreement. Mr. Graves retains ownership of the Weber Genesis 2E 435, including all accessories and propane tanks, and I'd never been more grateful for legal specificity in my life. That grill represented everything good about being single. Making impractical purchases without committee approval, cooking things at weird hours because nobody's going to judge you, and the simple joy of open flames and meat. Post-divorce life was settling into something that resembled peace, or at least the absence of active chaos. The house was quieter without Lydia. No HGTV playing constantly in the background, no discussions about throw pillow arrangements, no passive-aggressive notes on the counter about dishes I'd allegedly left in the sink. Just me, Max the dog, and the blessed silence of not having to justify my existence to someone who decided I wasn't worth justifying theirs to. Max had adjusted well, better than expected for a dog who'd spent 5 years watching his humans pretend everything was fine while slowly growing to resent each other. He followed me everywhere now, this loyal shadow who didn't care that I sometimes forgot to make the bed or left laundry in the dryer for 3 days. Dogs are great like that. They don't judge your life choices unless those choices involve forgetting dinner time. I'd heard through the extended family gossip network, which was somehow more efficient than CNN at breaking news, that Lydia had moved into an apartment above a yoga studio on the east side of town. The kind of apartment that real estate listings call cozy and intimate when they mean small, and your bedroom is also your living room. Eleanor had sent me photos, unprompted, showing the building's exterior with a text that just said, "This is what happens when you make poor choices." Savage. I was learning that my ex-mother-in-law had a vindictive streak that made my petty revenge look amateur. The real entertainment, though, came from watching Darren's life implode in spectacular fashion. Turns out his wife Monica, who I'd met exactly twice at school functions and remembered as being way too nice for someone married to a hedge trimmer stealing adulterer, had filed for divorce about 2 weeks after our Applebee's summit. According to the gossip mill, courtesy of my sister Pam, who'd somehow become friends with Monica's sister, she'd taken him for everything except his golf clubs, and even those were up for debate. But it got better. Walker Tate Realty, their grand business venture that was supposed to revolutionize local real estate, or whatever delusion they'd sold themselves, was already circling the drain. Turns out that when you start a business based on an affair and everyone in town knows about it, potential clients get squeamish about working with you. Who knew? Half their investors, which I suspected were mostly Darren's golf buddies who'd agreed to pitch in some money over drinks, had pulled out faster than his hairline had receded over the years. And that was saying something, because Darren's hairline had been in full retreat since his mid-30s. Owen had come by the house last weekend, doing that thing kids do when their parents divorce where they feel obligated to check in and make sure nobody's having a breakdown while eating ice cream directly from the container at 2 in the morning. Not that I'd done that. More than twice. He'd found me in the garage, organizing tools that didn't need organizing, because apparently that's what divorced men do. We find projects that keep our hands busy and our minds from wandering into what-if territory. Hey, Dad, Heath said, leaning against my workbench. How are you holding up? Better than expected, worse than I pretend, I admitted, because Owen was 20 and deserved honesty over platitudes. How's school? How's Chloe? School's good. Chloe's dealing. Her dad moved into a condo near the golf course and apparently spent the first week there drinking whiskey and calling her crying about how he never meant for it to happen. Which, is super helpful for her mental health. Yikes. Yeah. Her mom's doing better though. Filed for divorce, joined a book club, a real one, not whatever mom was pretending to do, and started dating her personal trainer. I couldn't help but laugh. Good for Monica. She deserves better than Darren. Everyone at school knows, by the way, Owen said, looking uncomfortable. About the whole thing. The selfie made it onto Reddit somehow. There's a thread called Most Awkward Family Photos, and you're like third from the top. I should have been mortified. A year ago, hell, a month ago, I would have been mortified. But standing there in my garage, in my house that I got to keep, with my son who still respected me despite the chaos, I felt something unexpected, pride. Good, I said, putting down the wrench I'd been pretending to need. Maybe people will learn what happens when you mess with a man who knows how to use group chat drama properly. Owen grinned, the first real smile I'd seen from him in weeks. Dad, that's kind of savage. I learned from the best. Your grandmother's been texting me memes about your mother all week. Did you know Eleanor knows what memes are? It's terrifying and amazing. She sent me one comparing Mom to the Titanic. Said she was going down and taking bad decisions with her. We both laughed, and it felt good. Normal. Like maybe we'd all survive this after all, not despite the drama, but somehow because of it. Sometimes families need to explode before they can rebuild into something better, something more honest. That evening, Greg showed up right at 7 with a 12-pack of craft beer that probably cost more than a textbook and the kind of enthusiasm that only comes from a man who's witnessed your life fall apart and is genuinely happy to see you landing on your feet. To freedom, he said, handing me a beer after I'd gotten the steaks on the grill, the sound of sizzling meat filling the backyard like a symphony of single life. To freedom, I echoed, clinking bottles with him. And to fathers-in-law who write bulletproof prenups. And to wives who are dumb enough to violate them, Greg added. And to group chats that expose infidelity in real time. And to Applebee's, the true hero of this story. We drank to all of it, the good, the bad, the absurd. Max sat at our feet, hoping for steak scraps and providing moral support through his presence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks that Lydia would have said were gorgeous and tried to take pictures of for Instagram. But she wasn't here, and I didn't have to perform happiness for social media or pretend that everything was perfect when it wasn't. The steaks came off the grill medium rare, exactly how I liked them and exactly how Lydia had always said was too bloody. I cut into mine, the juice running onto the plate, and took a bite that tasted like vindication and charcoal and the simple pleasure of doing exactly what I wanted without needing permission. So what's next? Greg asked around a mouthful of ribeye. Dating apps? Midlife crisis purchases? Backpacking through Europe? I'm thinking about getting a motorcycle, I said, surprising myself. Something completely impractical and mildly dangerous. Do you know how to ride a motorcycle? Not even a little bit. But I've got time to learn and nobody to tell me it's a bad idea. It's a terrible idea, Greg said cheerfully. You should absolutely do it. That was the thing about freedom. It came with the possibility of making your own mistakes instead of living inside someone else's. It came with quiet houses and loyal dogs, and steaks cooked exactly how you wanted them. It came with the knowledge that you'd survived something that was supposed to break you, and came out the other side still standing, still laughing, still capable of finding joy in small things like perfectly grilled meat and overpriced beer with your best friend. Later that night, after Greg had left and I'd cleaned up and Max had gotten his share of steak scraps, I stood in my backyard and looked up at the stars. Somewhere across town, Lydia was in her yoga studio apartment, probably regretting everything. Somewhere else, Darren was in his golf course condo, definitely regretting everything. But I was here, in my house, on my property, living my life the way I chose to live it. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like exactly enough. Freedom looked good on me. Like, genuinely good. The kind of good that makes you wonder why you spent 20 years living any other way. I joined a gym 2 months post-divorce, not because I suddenly developed an interest in fitness or had delusions about getting six-pack abs at 45, but because Greg told me the sauna was where middle-aged divorced men gathered to gossip like teenagers. He was right. That sauna was better than therapy and cheaper too. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd sit there sweating out my poor life choices while listening to guys named Brad and Tyler discuss their ex-wives' new boyfriends and custody arrangements. It was like a support group, except everyone was half-naked and nobody pretended to have their life together. The real midlife crisis move, though, was the convertible. A cherry red Mazda MX-5 Miata that I absolutely could not afford and bought anyway, specifically despite the ghost of my dead Subaru and every practical decision I'd ever made. Lydia would have hated it. It's impractical, Martin. Where will you put groceries? Exactly, Lydia. Exactly. I didn't need grocery space. I needed wind in my thinning hair and the ability to feel like I was 25 again, even if my back disagreed every time I got out of the low-slung seat. But the best decision, the absolute crown jewel of my post-divorce renaissance, was the podcast. Greg and I started it on a whim after our fourth beer one night, calling it Divorced but Delightful, because we thought we were hilarious. Turns out, we were right. Episode 1 was titled, When Your Wife Becomes Your Son's Girlfriend's Stepmom, and featured me telling the entire saga from Subaru death to Applebee's apocalypse to settlement victory. We recorded it in Greg's basement with a microphone he'd bought off Amazon and the confidence of two men who had nothing left to lose. It went mildly viral. Like 30,000 downloads in the first week viral. We got emails from people sharing their own divorce horror stories, requests for legal advice that Greg couldn't give, and one marriage proposal that I politely declined. The best review came from Eleanor. 5 stars. Compelling narrative. Excellent pacing. Needs more mozzarella stick content. Even my ex-mother-in-law understood good entertainment when she heard it. Martin 2.0 was officially online, and he was thriving. 6 months after the divorce papers were signed, sealed, and delivered like the world's worst Amazon package, I decided to throw a party. Not just any party. A full-blown backyard barbecue that I titled The Celebration of Bad Decisions That Led to Great Ones. The invitations went out via group text with a photo of my grill and the caption, "Come watch a middle-aged man overcook meat and overshare emotions." Turns out, people love watching other people's chaos transform into something resembling happiness. My backyard filled up fast. Neighbors who'd witnessed my car die and my marriage implode showed up with potato salad and morbid curiosity. Greg brought champagne. The good stuff, not the $7 grocery store garbage. And his new girlfriend, who seemed genuinely confused about why anyone would celebrate a divorce, but was polite enough not to ask. Pam arrived with her husband and enough, I told you so, energy to power a small city. Even Eleanor made an appearance, wearing a pantsuit and bringing homemade coleslaw like this was a corporate merger instead of a divorced dad's therapy session disguised as a cookout. The surprise guests were Owen and Chloe, who showed up holding hands and looking significantly less traumatized than they had at the Applebee's summit. Young love had apparently survived the wreckage of parental stupidity, which either made them incredibly resilient or incredibly naive. Probably both. Dad, Owen said, surveying the backyard setup. The tiki torches I'd hung without anyone's input, the cooler full of craft beer that Greg had influenced me into buying, the grill smoking like it was auditioning for a barbecue commercial. This is actually kind of nice. Don't sound so surprised. I'm capable of hosting events without adult supervision. Are you though? Chloe asked, grinning. Because last time we all got together, it ended with lawyers. That was a meeting. This is a celebration. Completely different vibes. The evening rolled on with the easy rhythm of people who'd collectively survived something ridiculous and were choosing to laugh about it instead of crying. Burgers sizzled, beer flowed, and at some point, someone asked the question I'd been waiting for. Martin, have you forgiven Lydia? The backyard went quiet. Even the music seemed to pause, like the universe wanted to hear my answer. I flipped a burger. Perfectly, because I'd been practicing and considered it. Sure, I said finally. Forgiveness is free. It doesn't cost me anything to not actively hate her. But access? Access is not free. Access is earned, and she spent 20 years of credit in about 6 months. Greg raised his beer. Poetic and petty. That's my boy. The gossip mill had been working overtime, and the rumors about Lydia and Darren were too good not to share. Walker Tate Realty had officially collapsed 3 months after the divorce, buried under debt, and the kind of reputation you can't recover from when everyone knows your business started as an affair. Darren, last I heard, was selling used cars on the south side of town and living in that golf course condo that was definitely not impressing anyone. His hairline had continued its strategic retreat. Lydia, according to Eleanor, who'd maintained surveillance-level awareness of her daughter's activities, was now selling wellness candles on Instagram. Hand-poured, organic, small-batch nonsense that cost $40 and smelled like regret mixed with lavender. Good for her, honestly. She'd always liked lighting things on fire. Our marriage, her financial future, bridges with everyone who'd trusted her. Might as well monetize it. As the sun set, painting the sky in those ridiculously beautiful colors that made everything look like a movie ending, I raised my beer and addressed my weird little crowd of survivors and spectators. To dead cars, dead marriages, and the joy of taking a perfect selfie at the worst possible moment, I announced. Max barked his agreement, tail wagging like he understood exactly what we were celebrating. Because sometimes your car dies on Main Street in front of a skyscraper while your marriage dies 50 feet away. And sometimes that's not the ending. It's just the catastrophically messy beginning of something better. I'd driven away from the wreckage of my old life in a tow truck, scared and angry, and clutching lukewarm coffee like a security blanket. But I was driving through my new life in a red convertible, laughing with friends, hosting parties, and finally understanding what freedom actually felt like. It felt like medium-rare steak and overpriced beer and a dog who didn't judge you and a backyard full of people who'd watched you fall apart and stuck around to watch you rebuild. It felt, surprisingly, like happiness.